And here we see the pretentious art ass in his natural habitat. Surely, any moment now, he'll awaken from his stupor to tell us all about game design despite never making a game himself. Let's listen in. Yep. Pokémon being too easy is one of those things that's become so commonly repeated that it's just treated like it's fact. But much like, sir, that's not edible, you need to leave this JCPenney right now. It's something I don't think I could possibly disagree with more. Chapter 1. Too easy for who? So the first thing to acknowledge in any given discussion about difficulty is that it's a fully subjective thing. Donkey Kong Country is not a game I have a particularly large amount of trouble with, but to someone less familiar with the game, its genre, or video games as a whole, it might as well be Beyblade Metal Fusion for the Nintendo DS. This is all relevant because Pokémon is made for everyone, and everyone includes kids. Let's not forget that almost none of us would be here if these games weren't reasonably able to be beaten by children. And so, this begs a question. How many smashed 3DS screens do you think this motherfucker is responsible for? I had trouble fighting frickin' Norman when I was younger. The climax of Scarlet and Violet would have smeared my ass across the pavement. And if child me had to fight Ultra Necrozma, he probably would have lost 5 times, cried, and turned the console off. What I'm saying here is twofold. The games are not only already occasionally brushing up against the ceiling of what kids can tolerate, but they also really haven't gotten any easier over time, which is another one I hear consistently. Nothing's really changed that much. Cynthia was kinda just the Gen 4 kids Whitney, and Ultra Route 15 Plumeria is kinda just the Gen 7 kids Route 110 rival, if you can even handle a sentence that sexy. I really hate to tell you this, but we've just gotten old. You simply cannot hand the same tools to a 7-year-old and a 27-year-old and expect them to experience the same level of challenge. And besides, what even makes Pokémon difficult? I know this probably sounds like a stupid question because the obvious answer is difficult battles, but what exactly does that mean? Is a battle difficult if the other trainer is over-leveled? What if the computer reacts to your decision each turn to predict your plays? What if they have movesets with good coverage so they can surprise you with attacks you could never possibly see coming? What if you have to grind to get through the game? What if I have to play this tiny-ass handheld with adult-size hands? Which of these count and which of them don't? Do any of them actually sound difficult or just more frustrating? Who gets to make that call one way or the other? How will that affect players of different skill levels? How do you even begin to answer any of these questions? My little darlings X and Y have a T-Rex aerial acing me from the ground and a gross little gremlin with contrary superpower Malamar, so naturally everyone considers them the easiest Pokemon games of all time. Do you understand how nebulous this whole thing is? Not only is it all completely dependent on who you are as a player, but also, Chapter 3, this shit is unbalanceable. The newer games tend to feature around 400 Pokémon natively for you to choose from in creating your team of 6. That is already a ton to consider when trying to balance a game, but then add on to that all the different type combinations, base stat possibilities, EVs, IVs, abilities, natures, toss in a heaping helping of potential cheese strategies to account for, and you have a delectable recipe for a hernia. In my opinion, the creation of a balanced experience, considering this obscene number of variables, is about on par with the odds of me ever being respected. It could happen, but I'm not counting on it. The simple, sad fact of the matter is that if you balance the game around Farfetch'd, Dodrio is walking through like it's paper mache. But if you balance the game around Dodrio, my boy Dux doesn't stand a goddamn chance. Considering what we're working with, I don't think I could craft a difficulty that satisfies f***ing anyone, let alone everyone. And that is precisely where Game Freak's true genius shines through. Do you remember what I said earlier? Anyone who doesn't like mayo on their burger is a coward. Also, my future self is really hot. You simply cannot hand the same tools to a 7-year-old and a 27-year-old and expect them to experience the same level of challenge. Also, my future self is really, really hot! This is the secret ingredient that makes me consider Pokemon's difficulty absolutely perfect. We don't necessarily have to use the same tools as the kids. If you know these games at all, which I assume you do if you're complaining about difficulty, you know which Pokemon are strong. And that is precisely why you shouldn't be using them. Chapter 4: The Thievel Theorem. Two things I really want to encourage with my silly little videos are critical thinking and open-mindedness, because I really feel like the blind cynicism that a lot of people approach art with ends up biting them. You didn't just enjoy Pokemon more as a kid because you had no standards or something. You probably enjoyed it more because kids are just more willing to take in a game for what it is. Meanwhile, adults have preconceptions, biases, and unfortunately, less open minds. We've all played a bunch of great games that do everything in their power to craft a challenging experience between you and the flagpole, but the idea that every game has to be that way is super restrictive of art and just genuinely not true. What I've been attempting to establish today is that core series Pokemon has really never gone for that, because without adding on heavy restrictions, it honestly can't. People love to point to Colosseum as being a good display of difficulty, but that game only has like 50 Pokemon in it. Of course it was able to be balanced like that. They put team building up on the cross for it. This is also why I don't like the idea of just adding difficulty options. Not only is it less immersive and, in my opinion, much less interesting, but it's honestly not even likely to actually solve any problems unless they limit who you're allowed to use, which would be lame and kinda pointless. The core series is already designed such that you have everything you need to craft your own enjoyable experience. And that brings us to the Fox. Thievel, number 828, is a Dark-type Pokemon introduced in Sword and Shield that I have repeatedly heard completely slandered as being unusable due to his stats. He's seemingly become Galar's poster child for this kind of Pokemon. But then you actually look at those stats and you realize, oh, he's got more special attack than Swampert, and a higher speed stat than Suicune. What I'm saying here is, if Thievel is unusable, then I am from Roman times and promito tibi non ite esse. You're not gonna find the thing tearing up VGC anytime soon, but disregarding this Pokemon for a playthrough purely because it's not the best in its class is cynicism in its finest form, and you are the one suffering for it. This Pokemon, and the others like him, are the answers to your difficulty problem. And yet all I hear when I bring that up is, well, if you play with the weak Pokemon, it just means you have to grind. And I mean, like, holy sh**. Can people who say this kind of stuff even hear the words coming out of their own mouth? You're saying you want the games to be harder, but that you don't want to use Pokemon that make them harder, because then you'd have to spend time making them easier? I mean, when you put it that way, help. Pokemon's sheer number of variables necessitates that the player play a role in determining their own experiences, whether that be through how much you train, internal gameplay mechanics like set mode, or external gameplay decisions like using Pokemon that are weaker in battle. It cracks me up when people act like they're outsmarting Game Freak by doing monotype runs or something, as if 95% of trainers you fight in every game aren't showing off that exact idea. Pokemon games are true RPGs. You are supposed to make your own fun. You don't have to engage in the dominant strategies at all times. I mean, think about it. What is stopping you from leveling your entire team to 100 before you fight the first gym? Or going back to the Pokemon Center after every single battle? The answer is you. We all stop ourselves from doing that because it's not fun to play that way. You see what I'm getting at? You're already catering your experience around what you want it to be just by playing normally. So why stop to complain about Grookey being able to beat the game on his own when you could just choose to play in one of the 1,000 other ways you could be having fun if you just let yourself? I don't want to imply in any way that you are wrong if you don't like this kind of game, because that would be ridiculous. I love plenty of futuristic side-scrolling action platformers, and cannot stand Metroid or its genre. And it's not because there's anything actually wrong with the games. Although the lack of Proto Man is really pushing it. Some games and styles just simply aren't gonna be for you, and that's okay. But implying that something is wrong with those games for not appealing to you is not reasonable. You might be able to tell based on the fact that you're listening to a giant ramble about it, but I find all of this to be genius, genuinely engaging game design. I am in awe of the fact that the same game can appeal to child me, mashing through dialogue and overleveling my starter, just as much as it does to current me, me as an adult that likes to analyze game design and team build. The franchise is only able to do this because it hands us the reins. So if challenge is your most important thing, you're gonna have to put down the Lucario and pick up the Toxicroak. Pokémon is made for everyone, and personally, I think a game that's unbeatable for Sunflora fans is a way worse outcome than a game that's too easy for Vileplume fans who still have the option to use Sunflora if difficulty is their bottom line. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, if Salamence is your favorite Pokémon, you can use it. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't, because games are about having fun, and in Pokemon's case especially, being happy. Please believe me when I say that this video is not trying to restrict the way you play the games. You should play Pokemon in the way that is most fun for you. You just have to acknowledge the effect that using certain monsters will have on your experience. Same as all the Ledian heads out there have to accept that their favorite makes the games way more difficult, you have to accept the opposite. And all I'm saying is that blaming the games for not accommodating your 600 BST dragon while the player next door's flying type is Jumpluff? Well, it makes you sound pretty darn silly. Chapter 5. Please play X and Y again without the EXP share. When you turn it off, they're so much better than you remember, I swear to God. So, where does that leave us? I always knew I wanted to have this discussion someday because it's an aspect of Pokemon that I think is really good and really under-discussed. There is no shortage of what the hell Game Freak made Magcargo wrong, but I pride myself on the bravery to ask, why did Game Freak make Magcargo this way? It can be a little difficult when the topic of the video is what I believe to be misinterpretations of game design, but I truly don't want to come across as believing I'm above anyone else here. While I don't care about difficulty in Pokemon, and do think they've always done a fine job with it, well, Pokemon is made for everyone, and I do hope that in the future they give the fans that crave a challenge a bit more to chew on. I hope they give us a proper level curve back after Scarlet and Violet slam dunked it into the dumpster. I hope they let us turn off the EXP share again for more playthrough customization. And I really hope they try throwing some more double battles at us. I always thought it would be super cool if League-sanctioned battles, like at gyms in the Elite Four, used our official competitive format. They could even go full VGC if they did that and limit you to bringing in 4 Pokemon, which would add a whole new layer to gearing up for those fights, while still allowing the random bug-catching and bird-keeping mooks you run into to be quick little single battles. I think all of these suggestions could help provide a little more resistance without throwing game design in the furnace. And, you know, maybe they could even throw a bone to all the poor delusional souls like myself still hoping for some kind of classic series in the future that's more hardcore, older fan-focused. I sincerely doubt they would ever do that, but it would be a perfect opportunity to try testing some limits. When push comes to shove, we all want these games to be good in our own ways, and this is just how I personally see things. I'm genuinely sorry if Pokemon is doing something that hurts the experience for you. As a distinct hater of open world games, I really get it. But please, be mindful of game design you might have overlooked in the past, as well as what you're actually asking for when you complain about something. Please consider the very notable difference between different and bad. It's 100% okay if you don't like something, including every last thing I've said in this entire video. All I ask is that you be willing to articulate why you feel that way, instead of just defaulting to, it's not for me, so it must be bad. That way of thinking is not healthy and will never accomplish anything. Unless, of course, your goal was to incur a 14-minute rebuttal from me, in which case, way to go. If you want your next playthrough to present a bigger challenge, or even just something that feels new, I highly recommend you try setting some rules for yourself. The Pokemon world really is your cloister when you simply choose to find fun. So turn off any EXP share you can, turn on set mode, and use, like, Cherim or something. I promise you will have more fun than you expect. And just maybe, you'll gain an appreciation for what Pokemon offers that you never had before. I think this video is gonna go over really well. After all, Pokemon fans are always super level-headed when you disagree with them. Gen 6 fan destroyed.